Many South Africans have faced a rude awakening in 2021. A study by Google explores our movements during different stages of the lockdown. It seemed like life was almost back to normal just before Christmas. Then it was back to level 3 lockdown. These numbers are fascinating. So let's check in with Michael Marillier, who's got the details for us. Michael, the question is, how does Google know where we are?
Yeah, that is the question, Clement. I was wondering the same, but it seems like the search engine giant actually uses location data that's collected from some of the apps on our phones, and it's able to determine whether you were in a residential area, Clement, whether you were going to work, for instance, or perhaps you were going to a shopping mall. But it seems, for the most part, last year, us South Africans were here at home. I hope you like my house, by the way. I managed to cut the lawn just before you crossed to me. The reality has been, Clement, that we have been under lock and key pretty much for the last 10 months. And Google's figures really show that time spent at home has just rocketed, particularly under level 5 and level 4 of the lockdown. Let's actually focus on that, Clement. So what Google did was it looked at the amount of time that was spent at home in January and February and used that as a baseline to compare the amount of time we spent at home during the lockdown. So take a look at these stats, Clement. 13% more time in our houses on the 27th of March. That, of course, was the first day of lockdown. Then things started to get really serious. 35% increase in terms of the time at home. That was in the middle of April. And remember, Clement, that those restrictions were relaxed as we moved closer and closer to the end of the year. In fact, we were almost back to normal in December, 8% more time at home then. But of course, on the 27th of December, we've got that announcement, that family meeting, if you want to put it that way, with Cyril Ramaphosa saying that we were back to adjusted level 3 of the lockdown. And that's reflected in the numbers from Google. 23% more time spent in our houses, Clement. So these stats tell us pretty much what we know already, but I think the numbers are really interesting in terms of how our home time increased during different stages of the lockdown. Clement?
That's interesting. So you've spoken to us about our time at home. What are you seeing in terms of shopping malls?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. One thing I can tell you about that, Clement, is you can park your red Corvette. Clement, by the way, loves to drive his red Corvette into the office. You can park your red Corvette, Clement, because you won't need to spend much time using it and driving to the mall. That's the reality. Let's take a look at the numbers. Google tracked, Clement, our visits to shopping malls, to restaurants, to recreational centres. And again, we see a similar pattern when it comes to the lockdown. Take a look at that massive dip, Clement, at the end of March and the beginning of April. Round about the 3rd of April, in fact, we saw a massive decline, 74% drop in terms of visits to recreational sites. You can see the restrictions easing throughout the year. In fact, by the time we got to Christmas Eve, Clement, we were almost above the baseline. We were looking at plus 3%. But then again, when the president made that announcement, take a look at that drop, down 17% on the 28th of December. And the 24th of January, that was just earlier this week, Clement, down 33%. So really, we are going backwards to some extent in terms of our movements within our own cities and our suburbs. Very quickly, let's move on and focus on the workplace, because this is really interesting. The work from home phenomenon has really expanded over the last few months, Clement. Take a look at these stats. Once again from Google, a massive, massive drop when that lockdown came into effect at the end of March, 68% down, in fact, in terms of visits to the workplace. Remember, Google's using your phone to track this data. Then we started to get back to normal. In fact, at the beginning of the last month of the year, 1st of December, just 12% down in terms of visits to the workplace. But now look where we are, Clement, 32% down on the 24th of January. So really, you can take two things out of that. Perhaps we are learning to work from home. We know a lot of companies have adapted. On the other hand, Clement, you could argue that the economy has taken strain and perhaps there aren't that many jobs out there anymore, and that would be a real concern for the government. But it is a Friday, Clement, so I thought we'd take a look at these numbers that really are interesting. The dips and the spikes tell a fascinating story from the past 10 months. Now you can go and drive that red Corvette of yours.
I wish. Thank you so much, Michael Marillier.